Hello, good morning. Welcome to this skirt tutorial. Ta-da! I have the little bow here that really helps to cinch in the waist. If you have not seen the previous top, this is the Lyra top. This is the matching set. So I created the skirt to be a matching set slash kind of a dress when worn together with the top. If you haven't checked out the Lyra crochet tutorial, go ahead and check that out so you can make yourself a matching set. Thank you so much to my patrons. If you would like to become a Patreon member, it comes with some cool perks like access to my master supply list as well as some written patterns. But let's get into the tutorial. To begin the skirt, we are going to start off by creating the waistband that will go around your waist. For this, we are going to be using a foundation single crochet chain. Oftentimes, I will say that like, oh, the foundation chain is optional and you can just start off with a regular chain. However, for this specific pattern, I would really highly recommend that you do actually utilize the foundation single crochet chain, just because the foundation single crochet chain has a lot more elasticity than a regular chain, which will enable you to slide your skirt over your hips and onto your waist. To make a foundation single crochet, we are going to start off by looping our yarn over these two fingers, twist, and then pull up your working yarn. So you've just created your first slip knot, and then go ahead and slide that slip knot onto your hook. Now I'm going to really zoom you in so you can see what I'm doing. So we're going to start off with a chain of 2, so 1, 2, and in the first chain we are going to insert our hook underneath the front part of our loop as well as the back here. So that's what you should be looking like. Now you're going to yarn over, pull up, yarn over, make your loop, yarn over, and pull through both loops. Now we are going to insert our hook into that loop that we made previously, making sure to go underneath both the front and back strands. Yarn over, pull up, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. Again, we're going to go into the loop that we created previously, underneath both of those strands, yarn over, pull up, yarn over, make your loop, pull up, yarn over, and then pull through both to finish off your single crochet. And again, into the strands, yarn over, pull up, yarn over, pull, make a loop, yarn over, and pull through both loops. You want to create enough chains so that once it's created and slipped together, it'll slide over your hips, but it'll still feel fairly snug on the waist. The stitch that we are going to use for the actual like panel of the skirt is going to be fairly elastic, and so this waistband should feel pretty tight as you slide it over your hips in order to ensure the best fit. But for myself, I am going to go ahead and continue creating 80 of these chains. Okay, so I have now completed my 80 foundation single crochet chains. That is what that should start looking like. Making sure that your work is not twisted, you're going to go into the very first foundation single crochet that you've created, and you're going to slip stitch everything together. So to do a slip stitch, you yarn over and pull that yarn over up and through. So at this point, I would highly recommend that you are actually trying this on, making sure that it fits. The thing that you see with the foundation single crochet chain is that it looks like this, but then it stretches out and is quite elastic. So for reference, when I fold this in half, it's about 11 inches unstretched. Whereas if I really stretch it out, I am getting just under 14 inches. So it's quite an elastic chain, foundation chain, which will allow us to actually be able to slide it over our hips, but still be quite fitted on the waist. However, because as you wear this and as you wash it, you are going to notice some stretching, I'm also going to create a double crochet mesh layer just in order to incorporate a little tie to be able to really cinch in that waist, you know, upon washing and wearing, and noticing that it starts to just stretch a little over time. It's just to kind of compensate for that. In order to start our double crochet mesh stitch, I'm going to begin with 5 chains. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So once you have your chain of 5, we are going to start off with a double crochet, just like the name suggests. We are going to start off with a yarn over. We are going to skip this next stitch, and then we are going to insert our hook into the very next stitch. Yarn over, pull up your yarn over, pull through 2, the first 2 loops on your hook, yarn over, and pull through the last 2 loops on your hook. And you'll start to see the little double crochet mesh stitch. Now we are going to chain 1, set up our yarn over, we're going to skip the next stitch and into the next one, insert your hook, yarn over, pull up, yarn over, pull through the first 2 loops, yarn over, pull through the last 2 loops. You just made your second pretty little mesh stitch. Chain 1, yarn over, skip this next stitch, go into the next one, yarn over and pull up, yarn over and pull through 2, yarn over and pull through the next 2. Chain 1, yarn over, skip the next one, go into the next one, yarn over and pull up, yarn over and pull through 2, yarn over and pull through the last 2. Chain 1, and you're just going to continue repeating this sequence of stitches all the way around your foundation single crochet chain or your waistband. And again, the mesh stitches are just for like added cinched inness at the waist, particularly just because like crochet clothes do tend to sort of stretch out over time. And by making this tie part of the waistband, you're going to make sure that the waist portion is going to still cinch in fairly well into the waist through wash and wear. Don't mind my ugly little yarn mess chasing me. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and continue all these double crochet stitches, and I'll meet you back and I'll show you how we connect it. As I'm nearing my very last stitch on this row, I realized I may have forgotten to mention that you should start off with an even number of foundation single crochet chains. I'll definitely write it in the instructions when I'm editing, but that's a note to self. You should start off with an even number of foundation single crochet chains, because if you do, that'll allow for a neater join when we're doing the double crochet mesh stitch. Because for the double crochet mesh stitch, you just want to start off with an even number of chains. It'll give you a neater join. Honestly, if you started off with odd, you don't want to go back and redo it. I get it. The only thing that you're going to kind of notice is that your last little mesh square is going to be a little crinkled, but it's really not that big of a deal and you really won't notice it too much. Anyways, I'm ready to insert my last double crochet mesh stitch, and by starting off with an even number of chains, that allows me for one last stitch here that hasn't been worked into. And I'm going to chain 1, and now I'm ready to join back to my very first chain that I created, the chain of 5, and I'm going to insert my hook into the 4th chain, which is going to be right here. I know this is the 4th chain because I can see the last chain of the chain 5. That's going to act as like the chain 1 that you did in between the double crochets, and it's just the chain right next to it. So yarn over and slip stitch your work all together, and this is what your double crochet mesh stitch is looking like. So this is basically your waistband done. Okay, so now I am going to start chaining for the length that I want my first top tier. This tier is not really meant to be super ruffled. This tier is supposed to be quite close to your body. And so because of that, we are basically going to be joining in row to stitch here in a 1-to-1 ratio. This will make a little bit more sense once I explain how the ruffles are created for the secondary tier. But anyways, for now, we're going to start off with the lemon peel stitch. When starting off with a lemon peel stitch, start off with an odd number of chains. You're going to be working an even number of stitches, but you're going to start off with an odd number of chains. And that's because that last chain is going to be used as your turning chain, which you will not be working into whatsoever during the remainder of this project. So essentially, I'm going to start off with 27 chains. So I'm going to be working 26 stitches. If you want it longer, work an odd number of chains that's greater than 27. And if you want it shorter, work an odd number that is less than 27. So I'm going to start off with a chain of 27. Okay, so I have created my chain of 27, and I'm going to slightly turn my work so that I can work into the backs of my chains, which is going to be this little hump right here. Now, again, that last chain is going to be your turning chain, which you're not going to be working into. So you're going to insert your hook into the second chain from your hook. Me personally, I go through the back. I just find that it makes for a neater seam at the end of my projects. I'm going to go ahead and insert my hook, and I'm going to give myself a single crochet. So I'm going to yarn over once, pull up, yarn over once more, pull through 2. Now I'm using the lemon peel stitch, which is essentially alternating single crochets, which we just did, and double crochets, which I'm about to show you now. So you're going to start off with a yarn over, insert your hook into that chain back, yarn over, pull up, yarn over, pull through the first 2, yarn over, pull through the last 2. Okay, now we're going to do a single crochet, which again is just 1 yarn over and then pulling through, and then a double crochet. Now, if you've successfully began with an odd number of chains and you're working an even number of stitches, then you should always be starting your rows off with a single crochet and ending them with a double crochet. I'll often see questions of people asking me why their panel suddenly got shorter, or that they can see a decrease or an unevenness in their panel size. If it's not an issue with tension, it's most likely an issue of counting. But I do think that counting issues tend to arise more at the beginning of a row and an end of a row. So I'm going to make sure to show you guys how I do that end of row. So I'm now at my last 2 stitches, which is going to be a single and then a double. So a single crochet is going to go right in there, single crochet, yarn over, and then inserting right there. So again, if you kind of look, like, the advantage also of doing your stitches into the backs of your chains is that you will then get a very pretty nice braid here, as you can see. And then so when you're trying to work into the last stitch and you're kind of confused on what loop to insert your hook, you already have like this braid, and you can follow that braid down to see, oh, that's part of the braid, so I'm going to go through the back right there. Yarn over, pull up, yarn over, pull through 2, last 2. So I hope that makes a little sense. So now I am going to start inserting 2 slip stitches to connect this first tier of my skirt to the rest of my waistband. The first slip stitch that I am going to be putting in is in that chain 1 right here. So I'm going to go ahead and insert my hook, and then I'm going to yarn over, pull up, pull through. And when you're slip stitching, you know, like tiers together, I would really recommend that you're keeping a fairly tight tension on your hook, just to prevent from like any really large awkward gapping. And then we're going to insert our hook into the next chain, which is like the double crochet stitch, yarn over, and then pull up, making sure our tension is quite tight. Now we're going to turn our work. and we're going to skip those first 2 slip stitches into the last double crochet that we created. So the lemon peel stitch, you're always going to be alternating single crochets and double crochets. So if you ever kind of get lost in your work, this is a really good stitch to start understanding how to read your stitches. You know that like the clumpier stitch right here where there's like a lot of clumps, you can feel it too when you're crocheting. But when you feel that clump, you know that that was a previously worked double crochet, and so you're going to insert a single crochet. Likewise, the like really emptier stitch, as you can see, there's not as much of a clump. And then if you feel it, you don't really feel the clump. You know that that is a single crochet stitch. Yarn over into that stitch, and then do your double crochet. Again, I know that I am alternating single and double crochets. Like I said earlier, I feel like when you're a beginner crocheter, it's really easy to miscount stitches at either the beginning or the end of a row. So I'm going to show you what the end of your row should look like. So I'm at my last 2 stitches right here. That is what those stitches are kind of looking like. I'm going to insert my hook, make my last single crochet. I feel like particularly with the lemon peel stitch, it can be really easy to miscount. And so we can tell that we have done a single crochet because we see this one little V, it's really thin. Like, I feel like this is more applicable if you like put down your work and then you come back to it later. Like this is kind of how you read your stitches. But we know we just did a single crochet stitch, but we should always end a row with a double crochet stitch. So we're going to insert a double crochet stitch into the last stitch. And that last stitch, especially on this first row, can look really kind of crinkled over and can almost really blend in. I feel like that was something that I kind of struggled with when I was a beginner. And so I feel like it's good to really see like that is where you are placing your last stitch. And then as you work, like you can see that I have a very like straight edge, and that's usually how I achieve that. So chain 1, and that chain 1 at the end of your row is going to be your turning chain, which you are not going to work. You can turn your work, insert into the first stitch, which should be a previously worked double crochet, and you're going to work a single crochet. So you're always going to begin your row with a single crochet. So I'm going to work my lemon peel stitch all the way back up towards the waistband, and then I'll show you again how I use slip stitches in order to connect this panel. Okay, so I am nearing the end of my row again, and I am going to work my last single crochet and then my last double crochet. I feel like as you continue working more and more rows, it becomes a lot clearer. There's like more obvious knots at like the end of a row to indicate that you're at the beginning or the end of a row. I am now ready to use 2 more slip stitches to attach this panel to my waistband. So again, I'm going to go into the first chain 1 right here, slip stitch, and then I'm going to go into the actual stitch, which is the double crochet, and then chain 1, all the while trying to make sure that my tension, and you can see it's quite tight on those 2 slip stitches. Turn your work. You're going to skip those 2 slip stitches. Those are essentially kind of acting as like your turning chain as well as to connect the rest of your skirt together. But yeah, you're just going to continue creating your row of lemon peel stitch. Okay, last couple of stitches, last single, and last double. And then I'm going to chain 1, turn my work, and I'm going to continue creating rows and rows and rows of lemon peel stitch to incorporate all the stitches that I've created in the double crochet mesh chain row or stitch row, and then I'll show you guys what the end of that panel looks like once I reach it. Okay, so I am on my second to last row and I have one more double crochet mesh stitch to actually incorporate. So I'm going to go ahead and finish it off by slip stitching into this first chain one, and then I'm going to chain next into, or slip stitch next into the chain right next to it. Okay, so now I am going to skip those first two slip stitches that I've created, kind of stack my panels together, and then I'm going to go in under my first stitch that I have on this side of my panel, and then my first stitch on this side, and then I'm going to slip stitch seam that together. I'm going to insert my hook into my next stitch, into my next one, slip stitch it all together, slip stitch these next stitches together, and I'm going to continue creating my slip stitch seam all the way down the sides of my panel until it is all connected. As you can see, that is what it's starting to look like. And then if we look on the right side of our work, that is our seam that you see right there. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and continue finishing off this seam, and then I'll be back to give you some general measurements as well as how to make the ruffly tier. So once the sides of your panels are all seamed up together, this is what it should be looking like. This is the wrong side of our work, and this would be the right side of our work. At this point, I would highly recommend that you're trying this on for size, ensuring that it is going to slide over your hips, but will still fit fairly snugly on your waist. In terms of measurements, I am looking at just about 12 inches across. And then in terms of the height, it's about 5.5 inches, including like the waistband portion. Without it, it's closer to 5. So that is what my measurements are looking like so far. And now we are ready to start creating the second tier, or the ruffly tier. So you are welcome to make any adjustments that you may need when creating your ruffly tiers. You know, you can do 2 tiers, you can do 3 tiers, you can do the 1 tier like I'm doing. Generally, this is what you need to know. We are going to be working the ruffle tier very similar to how we created this top tier here, in which we are going to start off with an odd number of chains but working an even number of stitches, working the lemon peel stitch rows and rows and rows back and forth. The only big difference is how we are connecting this tier to the bottom of this tier. So essentially, in order to create the ruffly effect, we are going to be inserting, 2, 3, 4, however many you want, however roughly you want it. The more rows you put in, the roughlier it's going to get. But essentially, we're going to be putting about 2 to 3 rows per 1 row worked on the waistband slash, I guess this is like the waist to hip portion. So we're going to be inserting 2 to 3 rows of lemon peel stitch per 1 row that we worked for this section, the waist to hip section. Additionally, I'm going to start off with a much longer chain to begin with, but again, this is something that you can adjust depending on, how short or long you want this tier of your skirt to be. And so for myself, I'm just going to be doing 1 tier of ruffles. So to start off my ruffle tier, I began with 37 chains, so I'm going to be working 36 stitches. And again, I'm going to slightly turn my work and work into the backs of my chains, starting in the second chain from my hook. I'm going to start off with a single crochet, then work a double, a single, double, so on and so forth. I feel like if you've gotten to this point, you should be able to finish out this row, and then I will meet you back up to showcase how I use only 1 slip stitch in order to connect sort of this ruffle tier to the waist hip tier. I am at my last 2 stitches, so I'm going to go ahead and finish those up. Okay, so now I've completed my 36 stitches, started with 37 chains, have 36 stitches, but now I am going to use 1 slip stitch in order to connect this tier of ruffles to this waist to hip tier. So I'm going to bring it up close to you because I know that it can get a little complicated when we're working into the sides of stitches. For myself, I just kind of try to like pull apart my work to see where the rows are and approximately where to insert my hook. So I tend to go under like the first type of gap I'll see. The other thing that I will say as well, I always recommend inserting your hook not only under one, but 2 strands of yarn. I just find that doing so prevents from like really awkward large gaps in between portions of your work. Oh, my yarn kind of split. Okay, there we go. And then slip stitching it, making sure that I have quite a tight tension as I slip stitch it together. And then I'm going to turn my work and I'm going to go ahead and work another row of lemon peel stitch. And then I will work this row all the way down using 1 turning chain in between rows, and then I will come right back up to show you where I am inserting that slip stitch in order to connect this bottom tier to this waist to hip tier. Okay, so I have completed my last double crochet and I'm ready to insert my hook into the next little gap that I see. And for me, I am in this little gap right here, so I'm going to go ahead and insert my hook right there and then go ahead and make my slip stitch. So if you wanted to make this even more ruffly, really all you would have to do is continue going back into where you put in the slip stitch previously. It just creates for like much more ruffles in one space the more like rows you put in the same stitch. But for myself, like I don't want like a super ruffly look. I'm trying to go for a little bit more in between. So I am just gonna go ahead and move on to the next little gap that I see. But I'm gonna go ahead and turn my work and continue the lemon peel stitch as per usual. When I was originally designing and crocheting a matching skirt for the top, I knew that I really wanted to have that stitch orientation be up and down, so vertical, but I was kind of at a loss on how to do it in the way that I wanted the cut of the skirt to be. I don't personally love bodycon silhouettes on myself. The easiest way that I could think of making a skirt was just to make like a rectangular panel that kind of goes all the way around, especially when you are working your stitches up and down. But I really don't enjoy bodycon silhouettes on myself, and I knew that I wanted more of a flared cut. And I've seen crochet skirts that have the cut that I want, but usually they are worked horizontally and you create like multiple stitches in a single stitch in order to create those ruffles. So I kind of borrowed that idea, and instead of stitches in a previously worked stitch, it's like number of rows in a previously worked row edge, if that makes sense. So kind of a similar idea, just a slightly different execution. And you should start to see that your like top right here, where this ruffle tier meets the bottom of the waist to hip tier, you should see that it's like cinching in, right? And then it kind of stretches outwards. That should be happening because you're no longer working in a 1-to-1 row-to-row type of ratio. You're working in a 1-to-2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or however many. So once again, I have finished my row and I've worked all the way back up to the edge of, you know, my waist to hip tier. And I'm gonna go into like the next little gap that I see, which would be right around here. And I'm gonna go in underneath not only 1 strand of yarn, but also 2. So 2 total strands of yarn, slip stitch my work all together, making sure that I'm keeping quite a tight tension, turning my work, and then I'm gonna go ahead and continue creating my lemon peel stitch. And so essentially this is how you are going to continue repeating your work until you have reached all the way back around, just like we did with this panel, right? We're just adding many more rows. So this portion of the skirt is probably going to take you the most amount of time, but yeah, you're just going to continue this work, and then I'll come back once I have reached the other side to show you how I seam everything together. Okay, today is a very good day because I finally finished the ruffly portion here. This portion definitely takes the longest out of any of it, just because of the length of the ruffle portion that I created, as well as like a lot of rows. I am making sure to stop at the top of my row, or like the bottom of the waist to hip panel. So this way I can tighten up my little slip stitch that I created here, and then go ahead and stack the sides of my panels just like so, and then go ahead and insert your hook into the very first stitch that you created on this side of the panel, and then under the last stitch that you created on your very last row. Then go ahead and make a slip stitch. So again, we're going to go underneath the stitch, corresponding stitch, and slip stitch. And then I am just going to continue making these slip stitches until the very end of my row, aka all of my stitches have been seamed together. Okay, so I have successfully seamed my sides together. So this is what the wrong side is looking like. That is what the seam is right here. I can feel it. That is where my seam is on the right side. And then I'm just gonna pull out my yarn, give myself a good amount of length so that I can weave this in. And then because your skirt is now inside out, you can flip it right side out. Okay, and now I'm gonna show you how I create the little chain that'll go in through the double crochet mesh right here. Additionally, in terms of length, I'm looking at about 8.5 inches for the length of the skirt, and then wide is kind of hard because it is kind of ruffled. But if I just kind of lay it flat like such, and then if you want to just see like an approximate width, I am looking at about 12 inches at that, you know, edge right here of the waist to hip portion. And then here, obviously this is not like the most accurate measurement, but just so you kind of get an understanding or a feel for how big this skirt is, it's honestly just about double the size, 24 inches. So we're gonna create a chain that we're gonna weave in and out of the double crochet mesh stitch on the waistband. So we're gonna start off with our slip knot. Go ahead and slide that on your hook. And we're gonna start off with 2 chains. So 2 chains. I'm gonna slightly turn my work and go into the back hump, little back loop right there. And then I'm gonna yarn over and then pull straight up. From here on out, we're going to be doing the same stitch over and over again. So we're going to go into the previous loop that we created, yarn over, and pull up. Again, we're going into the previous loop we just created, yarn over, and pull up. Try not to have too tight of a tension when you are creating this chain. I would really recommend creating this with a looser tension. That way it's just easier to get your hook in. Don't mind my yarn splitting. But you are essentially just going to continue inserting your hook into the previous stitch you've created, and then yarning over and pulling the yarn over up. And as you can see, we are left with this really pretty, very sturdy braided chain. And then just for reference, my braided chain is about 52 inches in length. I didn't count how many like stitches I've done, I just went by the length. So yeah, once you are done with your chain, you are now going to, I would probably start at like the center seam right here, and then just go in and out. You could use your crochet hook to help you with this. I think it's fine just doing it with my own hands. But you can weave your chain in and out, and then this is just like extra, you know, security that you are gonna have that really cinched in waist effect. So you're just gonna go ahead and weave this in and out of the double crochet mesh stitch. And now you're finally done. Here is what the final skirt looks like. I absolutely adore her. I am so proud that I was able to figure out the vertical stitch orientation with the more roughly flared cut of the skirt that I really wanted. I feel like I was really successful at incorporating all the design details that I really wanted in the skirt, particularly because I did want it to be like a matching set between the top and the skirt so that I could wear it as separates, you know, style it in different outfits. But I also wanted to make sure that when worn together, it does kind of look like it's one dress and that you can kind of see the stitches kind of flow from the top into the skirt in the same sort of orientation or direction. And I also just find it really cool that I figured out how to make ruffles with working stitches vertically instead of horizontally. I hope you guys liked this tutorial. Make sure to leave me a like, comment any questions that you might have, and subscribe. Also, thank you so much for 50K. That's insane. Hello to everyone. And I'll see you on the next one. Bye.